I make my living off other people's nostalgia. Specifically, I flip vintage electronics on eBay, Walkmans, Game Boys, old film cameras. If it takes batteries and was made before 2005, I'll buy it, clean it, and mark it up 300%. It's a quiet life, mostly spent in my studio apartment in Seattle, surrounded by bubble wrap and isopropyl alcohol. I've seen some weird stuff in hoarder houses over the last 6 years, but I've never found anything I couldn't explain. Until last Tuesday. It was November 14th, a typical gray, dripping afternoon in the Pacific Northwest. I'd driven 40 minutes out to a sprawling estate sale near Shoreline. The Craigslist ad had promised electronics and collectibles, but when I arrived at 8:15 a.m., the place was a wreck. It was a 1,972nd split level that smelled intensely of wet dog and stale pipe tobacco. The air inside felt heavy, like it was hanging motionless in the hallway, thick enough to coat the back of your throat. I was digging through a cardboard box labeled MISC in the master bedroom when I saw it. Sitting on top of a tangle of coaxial cables and broken alarm clocks was a Polaroid Sun 600 LMS. It was the classic boxy 80 seconds model, black plastic with the rainbow stripe down the front. Usually, these things are beat to hell, cracked viewfinders, corroded battery terminals, or the rubber eyepieces melted into a sticky goo. But this one was pristine. I picked it up, and the first thing I noticed was the temperature. It was freezing cold, much colder than the ambient temperature of the room. It felt heavy in my hand, dense, like there was something inside it that weighed more than plastic and glass. I popped the film door open. The rollers were spotless, no dust, no rust. It looked like it had come out of the factory box yesterday. "How much for the camera?" I asked the guy running the sale. He was a nephew of the deceased owner, a jittery guy in his 40s with red-rimmed eyes who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He looked up from his phone, saw what I was holding, and flinched. Actually flinched. "Just take it," he mumbled, not making eye contact. $5. "It's worth more than that," I said, mostly out of habit. A working Sun 600 inches. This condition could fetch $80 easy. $5, he repeated, his voice tight. "Or leave it. I don't care. Just get it out of the house." I didn't argue. I handed him a $5 bill, grabbed the camera, and walked out into the drizzle. As I sat in my Honda Civic, waiting for the defroster to clear the condensation off the windshield, I looked at the camera sitting on the passenger seat. The gray daylight reflected off the lens, which looked like a dark, unblinking eye staring up at the roof of my car. I felt a sudden, irrational spike of anxiety in my chest, a tightness behind my ribs. I told myself it was just too much coffee on an empty stomach. I tossed a jacket over the camera so I wouldn't have to look at it during the drive home. But the feeling didn't leave. I should have listened to my gut. I should have thrown it out the window onto I-5 right then and there. But I didn't. I drove it home, carried it up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, and set it right in the center of my work desk. I keep a mini fridge stocked with film in my workspace. Polaroid film is temperamental. If you let it get too hot, the chemicals degrade and the colors shift into this ugly, washed-out magenta. I had 2 twin packs of Polaroid Originals 600 color film left over from a bundle I bought in October. I pulled one out and let it sit on the desk to reach room temperature while I wiped down the camera body. It was 4:45 p.m. The sun goes down early in Seattle this time of year, so the light in my apartment was already fading into a dull slate gray. I didn't turn on the overhead lights yet. I wanted to test the flash. I slid the release latch on the side of the camera. The plastic jaw swung open, revealing the empty film bay. I pushed the cartridge in until it clicked. Chunk. Then came the sound. If you've never used an old Polaroid, you might not know it, but there's a very specific mechanical noise when the camera ejects the dark slide. The protective card on top of the film pack. It's a high-pitched, grinding whirred. The camera spat out the black card. The green LED next to the lens lit up, indicating the flash was charged. It was ready. I swiveled my chair around to face my living room. My apartment is essentially one big box. From my desk, I have a straight shot of my IKEA couch, a dying fiddle leaf fig tree, and the large window that overlooks the alleyway. It was just an empty room. No movement, no drama, just silence and dust motes floating in the gray light. I raised the viewfinder to my eye. The world looked smaller and boxier through the glass. I framed the shot, centering the couch and the window. Click. The flash fired a burst of harsh white light that momentarily blinded me. The motor engaged immediately, spitting a square of white film out of the front slot like a tongue. I grabbed the photo by the bottom edge and set it on the desk, face up. "Don't shake it," I muttered to myself, a habit from explaining it to buyers. Shaking doesn't help, it just ruins the emulsion. I watched the image develop. It starts as a murky gray-blue fog. Slowly, shapes begin to ghost through. The outline of the couch appeared first, then the sharp rectangle of the window frame. The colors were typical for vintage film, slightly soft, slightly warm. I took a sip of my cold coffee, waiting for the contrast to settle. About 3 minutes in, I frowned. In the photo, the living room looked exactly as it was. The couch was messy, with a throw blanket. The plant was leaning to the left, but over by the window, on the right side of the frame, the exposure was wrong. There was a smudge. A tall, vertical darkness that shouldn't have been there. I leaned closer, squinting under the desk lamp. The image sharpened as the chemical reaction finished. My stomach gave a weird hollow lurch. It wasn't a smudge. Standing directly in front of my window, in the photograph, was a figure. It was tall, too tall, maybe almost touching the top of the window frame. It was blurry, like a thumbprint smeared across a lens, but distinctly humanoid. It had no features, just a mass of static darkness, vaguely shaped like a man in a heavy coat, standing perfectly still. I looked up from the photo, snapping my head toward the actual window. Nothing. Just the empty glass reflecting the dim room. The streetlights outside were starting to flicker on, casting long, normal shadows. I looked back at the photo. The figure was there, opaque and solid, blocking the view of the fire escape railing. "Dirty lens," I whispered. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet apartment. "It's just a dirty lens or a roller defect." My hands felt clammy. I picked up a microfiber cloth, my heart doing a nervous little flutter against my ribs. I told myself it was fine. It was just old tech acting up, but I couldn't stop staring at that dark shape on the glossy paper. It looked heavy. It looked like it was watching the camera. I'm a rational person. You have to be when you deal with old electronics. 99% of haunted items are just faulty wiring or corroded capacitors. So, looking at that first photo, I went into troubleshooting mode. "Double exposure," I muttered, grabbing a bottle of 91% isopropyl alcohol and a handful of Q-tips. Or a roller jam causing a drag line. It made sense. If the film had been exposed to light before I bought it, or if the rollers inside the camera were dirty, it could create vertical streaks. I popped the film door open again in the dark of my bathroom to save the remaining shots and inspected the mechanism. The rollers were spotless, but I cleaned them anyway. The smell of the alcohol was sharp and stinging in the small room. I scrubbed the lens until the glass was invisible. I even blew compressed air into the bellows. There was no way physically, no way anything was obstructing that lens. "Okay," I said, walking back out into the main room. "Control test. If the first photo showed a smudge on the right side because of a defect, a second photo should show the exact same smudge in the exact same place. That's how mechanics work. Defects don't move." I decided to change the angle. Instead of the living room, I turned 90 degrees to face my kitchenette. It's a cramped space, just a stove, a fridge, and a small round table with 2 chairs. One chair was tucked in, the other was pulled out slightly, facing the hallway. It was 5:02 p.m. I leveled the viewfinder. The frame was tight, the refrigerator on the left, the table in the center, the hallway door on the right. Click. The flash fired, the motor whirred, the white square slid out. I didn't wait at the desk this time. I held the photo in my hand, pacing the floor while it developed. I felt ridiculous. My heart was still hammering a little too fast, a physiological reaction to the unknown that my brain was trying to suppress with logic. "Come on," I whispered, watching the blue fog recede. The image cleared. The refrigerator appeared. Then the stove. Then the table. My breath hitched in my throat. The smudge wasn't in the same place. In the first photo, the figure had been on the far right, standing tall. In this photo, the anomaly was dead center. And it wasn't standing. The figure, that same mass of static, blurred darkness, was sitting in the chair. I dropped the photo on the counter like it was hot. I backed away until my back hit the refrigerator. The figure in the picture was hunched over, elbows resting on the table where nothing existed in the real world. Its head, if you could call it that, was angled down, as if it were studying the grain of the wood. I looked at the real table. It was empty. A single coaster sat there. Nothing else. But in the photo, the figure occupied physical space. It blocked the view of the wall behind it. It cast a shadow on the floor that wasn't there in reality. A cold prickle of sweat broke out on the back of my neck. My logic was breaking down. A lens defect doesn't sit down. A light leak doesn't change posture. I looked from the photo to the empty chair and back again. The air in the apartment felt suddenly thinner, harder to pull into my lungs. The silence wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt expectant, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to realize something. I grabbed the camera again. My hands were shaking now, just a tremor, but enough that the plastic body rattled against my ring. I needed to know if it was moving. Fear is a funny thing. It tells you to run, to hide, to freeze, but curiosity, that morbid human need to know, overrides it every time. I couldn't just leave the camera there. I had to prove this was a trick. I had to break the illusion before it broke me. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the short hallway leading to the bathroom. The hallway is narrow, maybe 5 feet long, with cream-colored walls. If the figure was just a projection of the camera's internal workings, it shouldn't have depth. It shouldn't understand distance. I decided to try a sequence. 3 shots, rapid fire. I raised the camera. My palms were sweating against the plastic grip. The smell of ozone from the flash hung in the air, sharp and metallic. "Show me," I whispered, my voice trembling. I aimed down the empty hallway. Click whirr. Shot 1. I let the photo drop to the floor without looking at it. I took a step forward. Click whirr. Shot 2. I dropped that one too. I took one more step. I was now standing in the middle of the hallway. Click whirr. Shot 3. I snatched the third photo as it ejected and backed up, retreating into the relative safety of the living room where the lights were brighter. I gathered the 3 photos from the floor and laid them out on my desk in order. 1, 2, 3. I waited. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The only sound was the wet, settling noise of the developing chemicals inside the film layers. Photo 1. The hallway is empty. At the far end, near the bathroom door, stands the figure. It's small in the frame, distant. The static blur is tight, contained. It's just standing there, facing the camera. Facing me. Photo 2. The perspective has shifted, because I stepped forward. The walls are wider. The figure is larger now. It hasn't just grown because I moved closer. Its posture has changed. One leg is blurred more than the other, as if caught mid-stride. It's not standing still anymore. It's walking toward the lens. Photo 3. I gasped, a sharp intake of air that hurt my chest. In the third photo, the figure dominates the frame. It's so close that the flash has blown out the details of its face, turning the upper darkness into a white-hot glare of overexposure. But the torso is clear. It's not just static. It looks like wet, heavy fabric, like an old wool coat soaked in oil. And there's a hand, a long gray hand with too many joints, reaching out toward the bottom left corner of the frame, toward where my hand was holding the camera. I looked up at the hallway. It was just a hallway, empty, mundane. But the photo told a different story. In the split second the shutter was open, something had been reaching for me, something that was getting closer with every click. I realized then that I wasn't just documenting a ghost. I was inviting it. The camera wasn't just seeing the figure, it was pulling it forward. Each flash was a beacon, a momentary bridge that allowed this thing to traverse the space between its reality and mine. I should have stopped. God, I should have stopped. But I needed one more proof. I needed to know where it was right now. I retreated to the bathroom. It's the smallest room in the apartment, a windowless box of white tile and fluorescent light. I locked the door behind me. It was a childish instinct. Locks don't stop ghosts, but the audible click gave me a microscopic sense of control. I stared at myself in the vanity mirror. I looked wrecked. My skin was grayish under the harsh light, and my pupils were blown wide with adrenaline. "It's the camera," I said to the mirror. "It's the internal processing mechanism. It's digital artifacts on analog film. It's broken." I needed to see it fail. If the anomaly was inside the camera's lens assembly, a picture of a mirror should show the anomaly on the camera in the reflection. Or, if it was a projection, it should appear in the glass. I raised the Polaroid Sun 600 to my eye, framing my own reflection. I could see my shaking hands holding the black plastic box. I could see the shower curtain behind me. I could see the empty space over my left shoulder. Click. The flash in the small tiled room was blinding. It bounced off the mirror, the white tiles, the porcelain sink. For a second, I saw spots dancing in my vision. The motor whirred, sounding louder in the confined space. Zhuzz. I grabbed the photo. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped it into the sink. I sat down on the closed toilet lid, knees bouncing, watching the chemistry resolve. The waiting was the worst part. That slow transition from blue fog to reality. It's agonizing. The image cleared. At first, I felt a rush of relief. In the photo, I saw myself in the mirror. I looked scared, hiding behind the camera. The space behind me in the reflection, the shower curtain, the towel rack was empty. Just white tiles and cheap fabric. See? I let out a jagged breath, a laugh bubbling up in my throat. It's nothing. The mirror is clear. It's just a... Then my eyes shifted focus. I wasn't looking at the reflection in the mirror anymore. I was looking at the foreground of the photo, the space before the mirror, the space where I was actually sitting. In the reflection, I was alone. But in the photo, standing directly behind my actual physical left shoulder, looming over me, was the figure. It wasn't a blur anymore. It was solid. It was tall, bent at the waist, its face that swirling mass of static positioned inches from my ear. It was looking down at the top of my head. Its long, undefined arms were draped loosely, almost touching my shoulders, like it was about to embrace me. The air in the bathroom suddenly felt ice cold. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, prickling with static electricity. I wasn't alone in the bathroom. I dropped the photo. It fluttered to the tile floor, face up. The figure in the picture stared up at me, while my reflection in the picture remained oblivious. I spun around on the toilet seat, flailing my arm out, expecting to hit a solid body. Nothing. Just the air. But the air felt thick, viscous, like moving through water. I could smell it now. Not just ozone, but something sweeter. Rotting flowers. Old stagnant water. The smell of a basement that hasn't been opened in decades. It was here. The camera didn't create it. The camera just revealed it. And the mirror. The mirror couldn't see it, which meant it wasn't reflecting light. It was something else entirely. I scrambled up, unlocking the door with fumbling fingers, and practically fell out into the hallway. I needed answers. I needed to know where this camera came from before I took another shot. I threw myself into my desk chair, putting the width of the room between me and the bathroom door. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a physical thudding that I could feel in my throat. I opened my laptop, my fingers slipping on the trackpad as I woke it from sleep mode. I needed to know what I had brought into my house. I pulled up the address from the estate sale listing. 1422 Cedar Park Drive, Shoreline, WA. I typed it into the search bar, adding keywords like news, police, and owner. The first few results were standard real estate junk, Zillow, Redfin, the estate sale listing itself. But the fourth result was a cached article from the Seattle Times, dated the 14th of October 2022. Search suspended for missing shoreline man. I clicked it, leaning closer to the screen, the blue light washing over my sweating face. Arthur Vance, 68, was reported missing by neighbors who hadn't seen him in 3 weeks. Police entered the home on Tuesday after a welfare check revealed mail piling up. The residence was secured from the inside. Deadbolts, engaged, windows painted shut. There was no sign of Mr. Vance, and no evidence of foul play. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the text, desperate for a detail that made sense of the thing in my bathroom. Authorities noted the home was in a state of extreme disarray, cluttered with vintage photography equipment. A police spokesperson mentioned a bizarre detail. Investigators found over 400 Polaroid photographs scattered throughout the master bedroom and living areas. According to the report, every single photograph appeared to have been vandalized, the images entirely obscured by heavy black marker or ink. I stopped reading. The air in my lungs turned to ice. They weren't vandalized, I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the 3 photos on my desk. The smear, the static, the darkness. In my photos, the figure was approaching. In the first, it was a smudge. In the second, a shape. In the third, a presence. If that thing got close enough, if it got right up to the lens, or right up to the person holding the camera, the resulting photo wouldn't show a room. It would just be blackness. pure, consuming static. Arthur Vance hadn't scribbled over his photos. He had been documenting his own stalking. 400 photos. 400 times he pulled the trigger, watching that thing get closer and closer, until what? He disappeared from a locked house. I looked over at the Polaroid Sun 600. It was sitting on the corner of my desk where I'd left it before the bathroom experiment. It looked innocuous, just a piece of plastic from the 80 seconds. But now, knowing what I knew, it looked like a trap, a lure. I suddenly remembered the nephew's face at the sale. The flinch. The way he wouldn't touch it. Just get it out of the house. He knew. Maybe he didn't know what it was, but he knew that camera was the epicenter of whatever happened to Arthur, and now it was in my apartment. A soft sound broke my concentration. I froze. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I slowly turned my head to the right, toward the desk corner. The camera was sitting there. I hadn't touched it in 20 minutes. Click. The sound was unmistakable. The mechanical shutter firing. But nobody was holding it. I stopped breathing. The sound hung in the air, echoing slightly in the silence of my apartment. Click. Where's it? I watched, paralyzed, as the white tongue of a fresh photo slid out of the front slot of the camera. The camera hadn't moved. It was sitting flat on the desk, the lens facing the wall facing me. No, I whispered. My voice was thin, barely a scratch in my throat. That's impossible. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. The wheels groaned on the hardwood floor, and I winced at the noise. I stared at the camera like it was a bomb. The green flash ready light was glowing, a tiny malevolent eye in the dim room. The photo fell from the slot and fluttered onto the desk surface, landing face down. I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, to grab my keys and sprint out the door, but I was frozen, caught in the gravity of the object. The air around the desk was freezing cold again. I could see my breath misting in front of my face, tiny puffs of white vapor vanishing into the gloom. My apartment is usually warm. The thermostat is set to 72, but near that desk, it felt like a meat locker. I reached out, my fingers trembling violently. I picked up the photo by the very edge. The paper felt damp, colder than room temperature should allow. I flipped it over. It was still developing, that familiar milky blue square. But as I held it, looking down, the overhead light in the hallway flickered. Once. Twice. Then it buzzed and died, plunging the entryway into darkness. Now, the only light came from my laptop screen and the streetlights outside filtering through the window. The same window where I'd first seen the figure. I looked at the window. The glass was black with night now. I couldn't see outside, only the reflection of my living room. And in the reflection, behind me, the room looked crowded. Shadows that shouldn't be there were stretching across the floor. Long, spindly shadows that didn't match the furniture. I looked back at the photo in my hand. The image was starting to clear. It wasn't a picture of me at the desk. The angle was wrong. The camera was sitting on the desk, facing me, so it should have taken a picture of my torso. But the image forming on the paper was from a high angle. A very high angle. It was looking down from the ceiling corner. I looked up at the corner of the room. Nothing there but cobwebs and shadow. I looked back at the photo. It showed the top of my head. It showed my laptop screen. And it showed something standing directly behind my chair. Something tall. I spun around. The space behind my chair was empty, but the air was thick, resistant. It felt like walking through a heavy curtain. The smell of ozone and wet rot was overpowering now, gagging me. The camera on the desk made a sound again. Not a click this time. A low, electronic whine. The charging capacitor. It was charging the flash on its own. The capacitor's whine hit a pitch so high, it felt like a needle drilling into my eardrum. Click. The flash fired again, unbidden. This time, I didn't just flinch. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on the hardwood floor. The camera sat innocently on the desk. Smoke curling faintly from the flashbulb housing. Whirr, zzz. Another white square slid out, landing on top of the previous one. I scrambled to my feet, my breathing coming in short, ragged gasps. I wanted to smash the thing. I wanted to grab a hammer and shatter the plastic casing into 1,000 pieces. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a sick, voyeuristic compulsion. I had to see what it had seen. I crept back to the desk. The air was frigid, biting at my exposed skin. I picked up the fresh photo. My hands were shaking so violently. I had to brace my elbows against the desktop to hold it steady under the lamp. The image began to surface from the blue chemical fog. At first, I didn't recognize the angle. It was low, looking across a flat surface. Then, the details sharpened. It was my bed. My stomach dropped. My bedroom is in the back alcove of the apartment. I hadn't been back there since I walked in the door. I certainly hadn't taken a picture of it. As the contrast deepened, I felt the blood drain from my face. In the photo, I was in the bed. I was lying on my back, tangled in the gray duvet. My eyes were closed, mouth slightly open in deep sleep. The digital clock on the nightstand in the photo read 3:33 a.m., but I wasn't alone. Hovering directly above me, suspended horizontally in the air, parallel to my body, was the figure. It defied gravity. Its long, oil-slick coat hung straight down, defying the laws of physics, draping over my sleeping form like a shroud. Its limbs were splayed out, clutching the edges of the mattress. And its face, that swirling, static blurred face, was positioned inches from my own. It looked like it was inhaling my breath. I looked at the clock on my actual desk. 6:14 p.m. This wasn't a photograph of the past. It wasn't a double exposure or a ghost from the previous owner's life. It was a premonition. The camera wasn't just documenting the haunting. It was storyboarding it. It was showing me how I was going to die. Or worse. I dropped the photo. It slid across the desk, coming to rest against the base of the lamp. I backed away, my heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. "It's not real," I choked out, the taste of copper sharp in my mouth. "It's not real." But then I heard it. From the back alcove from my bedroom came a sound. It was the creak of bed springs, the slow, rhythmic groan of weight settling onto a mattress. I stared at the dark opening of the alcove. The air coming from the bedroom smelled wet. Not just damp, but bog wet. The smell of stagnant pond water and decaying leaves. I wasn't going to wait for 3:33 a.m. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door. I had to get out. I had to leave the camera, leave the apartment, leave everything. I reached for the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. The doorknob was frozen. Not figuratively, literally. The brass metal was coated in a thin layer of frost, stinging my palm as I wrenched it uselessly to the left and right. I rattled the door in its frame, slamming my shoulder against the wood, but it held fast, solid as a bank vault. "Open!" I screamed, panic finally shattering my composure. "Open! Damn you!" I was trapped. The temperature in the apartment plunged. My breath came out in thick white plumes now. The condensation on the windows instantly turned to ice crystals, spider webbing across the glass and blocking out the streetlights. The familiar gray world of Seattle was gone, replaced by the white opacity of my own fear. Then came the smell. It started as a waft, subtle at first, but it thickened rapidly. Ozone. That sharp, metallic scent of an electrical fire. But beneath it was that other smell, the rotting flowers, the copper tang of old blood, the wet earth of a grave dug in rain. It clogged my nose, coating the back of my throat with a taste so foul I gagged, dry heaving against the locked door. Click. The sound came from behind me. The camera. I spun around, pressing my back against the door. The flash went off. The burst of light illuminated the room for a fraction of a second, burning an afterimage into my retinas. In that split-second strobe, I saw it. It wasn't in the bedroom anymore. It was in the middle of the living room. The figure stood between me and the desk. In the flash, it wasn't blurry. It was terrifyingly sharp. The coat wasn't fabric. It looked like wet, matted hair or fibrous muscle, slick with some black oil. Its limbs were too long, jointed in places that didn't make sense. And its face. God, its face. It didn't have features. Where eyes and a mouth should be, there was just a smooth, concave depression of gray flesh, vibrating. Not shaking, vibrating. Like the static on a dead TV channel made flesh. Darkness snapped back instantly. The room was black again, save for the faint glow of my laptop screen on the desk behind the creature. The capacitor whined again. It was recharging. I could hear it moving in the dark. A wet, dragging sound. Slap, drag, slap, drag, like wet meat being pulled across floorboards. It was moving toward me. My eyes strained in the gloom, but I couldn't see it. I could only hear it and smell it. The copper taste was overwhelming now, filling my mouth with saliva. I was too terrified to swallow. Click, flash. It was 10 feet closer. It was hunched now, its long arms dangling, fingertips grazing the floor. The static face was tilted, looking right at me. Darkness again. I scrambled sideways, diving over the arm of my sofa, putting the furniture between me and the thing. I huddled on the floor, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I realized with a jolt of horror that the camera wasn't just a window. It was a strobe light for a monster. Every time it flashed, the thing moved. Every time it flashed, the barrier between us got thinner, and the camera was charging faster now. The whine was higher, shorter. Click, flash. I peeked over the couch cushion. It was gone from the center of the room. I scanned the space in the fading afterimage. Where was it? Then I looked up. It was on the ceiling, clinging to the drywall like a spider. Limbs splayed out. Head rotated 180 degrees to look down at me. Darkness! I screamed, scrambling backward, knocking over the coffee table. Click, flash. It dropped. I hit the floor hard, scrambling backward on my hands and heels until my back slammed against the radiator. The darkness was absolute, heavy and suffocating like a wool blanket pressed over my face. The sound of the capacitor charging was a countdown, a death knell. In the pitch black, I couldn't hear the creature moving. That was the first clue, though my panicked brain didn't fully grasp it yet. When the light was gone, the wet dragging sound stopped. The breathing stopped. The room was silent, save for the electronic whine of the camera on the desk across the room. Click, flash. For 1/10,000th of a second, the room was white. The creature had landed on the coffee table. It was crouched low, its long, multi-jointed limbs gripping the wood so hard that splinters were flying up in the frozen moment of illumination. It wasn't looking at me, it was looking at the camera. Then, darkness. My mind raced, trying to find a pattern in the chaos. Why hadn't it grabbed me? It fell from the ceiling. It was right there. In the dark, I was defenseless. If it was a predator, it should have torn my throat out the moment the lights went out. But it didn't move in the dark. I held my breath, listening. Silence. No breathing. No rustling fabric. Click. Flash. It was closer. Not by walking. It had glitched forward. It was now standing on the rug, 3 feet from the desk. It wasn't moving toward me. It was moving toward the camera. Darkness. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The camera wasn't just a strobe light. It was an anchor. The entity didn't exist in our reality, not fully. It was like a radio signal without a receiver. The flash that burst of high-intensity ionization was the only thing that gave it mass. It needed the light to exist. It needed the chemical reaction of the film to bind itself to this plane. It wasn't hunting me. Not yet. It was trying to get to the source. If it merged with the camera. If it touched the lens while the shutter was open. The whine was faster now. The cycle was accelerating. It rides the light, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I had to stop the cycle. If I destroyed the camera, I destroyed the bridge. But the camera was on the desk. The creature was between me and the desk. Click. Flash. It was right in front of the desk now. In the strobe, I saw its hand gray, elongated fingers dripping with that black oil reaching out for the plastic casing of the Sun 600. The static void of its face was pulsing, hungry. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just reacted. I lunged into the darkness. I wasn't aiming for the camera. I was aiming for the desk lamp cord. If I could trip the creature, or knock the camera down. I scrambled on all fours, my knees banging against the hardwood. I felt the cold, wet air radiating off the thing as I passed near it in the dark. It was like passing an open freezer door. It smelled of ancient, rot-filled earth. I blindly swept my arm across the desktop. My hand connected with the boxy plastic shape of the camera. Got you, I hissed. I didn't try to be gentle. I swept my arm in a violent arc, sending the camera flying off the desk and into the darkness to my right. It hit the wall with a sickening crack, then clattered to the floor. Silence. No whine. No click. I lay on the floor, panting, my heart hammering against the floorboards. Had I done it? Had I broken the mechanism? Then, from the corner where the camera had landed, came a sound that made my blood freeze. ZZD. It was a broken, stuttering whine. The capacitor was damaged, shorting out. It wasn't charging for a full burst anymore. It was misfiring. Strobe. The room didn't go black. It went into seizures. Such flash, flash. The damaged capacitor was dumping its charge in jagged, uncontrollable bursts. The camera, lying broken in the corner, had become a strobe light from hell. The room flickered in a rapid-fire assault of white light and total darkness, faster than a heartbeat. Flash. The room was empty. Flash. The entity was standing by the window. Flash. It was by the couch. Flash. It was standing over me. It wasn't moving linearly anymore. The rapid strobing had torn the fabric of space-time in my living room to shreds. The creature was glitching through reality, closing the distance in impossible jumps. It was like watching a corrupted video file, frames skipping and tearing. I scrambled backward, crab walking on my hands and feet, trying to get away from the center of the room. The air was screaming. A high-pitched, oscillating frequency drilled into my skull, syncing with the strobe. My nose began to bleed, the warm liquid running over my lip, metallic and salty. Flash, flash, flash. In the staccato light, I saw it clearly for the first time. It wasn't wearing a coat. That dark, heavy mass draping its frame was skin-loose, necrotic skin that hung in wet folds like melted wax. And the static wasn't just on its face anymore. It was bleeding off the creature. Flash. Sparks of black electricity were arching from its long fingers, scorching the floorboards. It reached out, not for the camera this time, but for me. I hit the wall. Nowhere left to go. The camera sputtered in the corner, the bulb hissing as it heated up. The entity was inches away. It loomed over me, blocking out the rest of the room. In the strobe, I looked directly into the void where its face should have been. It was a swirling vortex of gray noise, like looking into a detuned television channel. I felt a pulling sensation, not physical, but mental. It was pulling my consciousness out of my head. I felt dizzy, nauseous, like I was falling backward into a deep, cold well. "No!" I screamed, the sound tearing at my throat. I couldn't let it touch me. If that static touched me, I knew I would end up like Arthur Vance. Just a smudge on a piece of film. A shadow in a locked room. I needed to kill the light. The camera was 5 feet away, skittering on the floor from the force of its own electrical discharge. I lunged. Not away from the monster, but through it. Flash. I felt a cold burn as I passed through its space, like jumping into a frozen lake. My skin blistered instantly from the necrotic cold. I hit the floor near the camera, my hands scrambling for a weapon. My fingers closed around a heavy glass paperweight. I kept on the desk a solid chunk of crystal. The entity was turning. I could see the skin folds swirling as it reoriented toward me. It was fast. Too fast. I raised the paperweight. "Lights out," I screamed. I brought the glass down with every ounce of terror and adrenaline left in my body. Crunch. I hit the flash housing dead on. The glass shattered. The plastic casing exploded. There was a loud pop, like a gunshot, and a shower of hot sparks sprayed across my face, singing my eyebrows. The light died. The wine died. The room plunged into absolute, heavy, suffocating silence. I lay there in the dark, clutching the broken paperweight, my chest heaving. I waited for the cold hands. I waited for the static. But there was nothing. Just the smell of burnt plastic and the slow, rhythmic dripping of my own nosebleed hitting the hardwood floor. I didn't stay to check if it was truly gone. I didn't turn the lights back on. I didn't even grab my laptop or my wallet. I scrambled to the door in the pitch black, feeling my way along the wall like a blind man, slipping on the photos that littered the floor, those little square windows into hell. I burst out into the hallway, down the stairs, and into my car. I drove until my gaslight screamed at me, ending up at a cheap motel off Highway 99, near the airport. That was 6 days ago. I haven't gone back to the apartment. I called my landlord yesterday and told him he could keep the security deposit and sell whatever was left inside. I told him I had a family emergency. I didn't tell him about the shattered plastic. and the smell of ozone that probably still clings to the drywall. I didn't tell him about the photos, face down on the floor. I'm writing this on my phone from the bathroom of the motel suite. I have the door locked. I've put duct tape over the gap at the bottom of the door. I've unscrewed the light bulbs in the main room because they buzz too much. I can't handle buzzing sounds anymore. The physical scars are real. My left arm, the one I swung through the entity to smash the camera, is covered in a strange burn. It's not red or blistered like a heat burn. It's dead white, cold to the touch, and the texture of the skin is rough, like sandpaper. If you look closely, the pattern of the scar tissue looks like static noise on a television screen. It hurts when it rains, but the psychological toll is worse. I can't look at cameras, any cameras. Yesterday, I went to a convenience store to buy water, and a tourist couple was taking a selfie near the ice machine. The flash on their phone went off, just a tiny, weak LED burst, and I hit the deck. I curled up on the linoleum floor, hyperventilating, waiting for the cold to come, waiting for the static face. I think I stopped it. I think destroying the capacitor broke the bridge, but I can't stop thinking about Arthur Vance. He disappeared inside a locked room. He didn't smash his camera. He let it finish, and I can't stop thinking about the estate sale. The nephew, he knew. He didn't want the $5. He wanted to pass the curse. So, this is my warning to you. If you're like me, if you scour thrift stores and estate sales for vintage gear, listen to me. If you find an old camera, especially a Polaroid, and it feels heavier than it should, put it down. If it feels cold to the touch, walk away. But most importantly, if you open the film door and see a cartridge already inside, do not take the picture. Do not finish the roll to see what's on it. There is a reason the previous owner stopped shooting. There is a reason they left that film unfinished. Some memories are better left undeveloped, and some things are just waiting for a flash of light to show you where they've been hiding all along.